Oh, hello again everyone, welcome back, thanks for visiting once again. I'm going to do a kit review today of an interesting little kit, I think, actually, from a manufacturer that I don't know very well. I'm sure that you'll all know it quite well, but we'll come to that in a minute. But first of all, I wanted to have a quick look at the swear box. I've revisited it after a conversation the other night with Chris at Rally Car Miniatures, and he's added another entry to the box, and here it is here, titsed it up, which I think is fairly descriptive of getting it wrong, I think, in a fairly significant way. Haven't added a cost to that at the moment, so if you'd like to suggest anybody in the comments how much that would be worth, then that would be most useful. But let's have that away for now. We'll put that up there in case I need it in a minute. But the kit I'm going to look at today is a Gloster Gladiator. So this is an ICM kit, and I got this because at the Gloucester Aircraft Museum they're actually doing a restoration on, I think, a Mark II Gladiator, and I thought it'd be quite interesting to take a look at this because it's going to represent some quite interesting challenges in terms of building. So I thought I'd go through that with you, and so here we are. So it's a nice little picture on the lid. I think I'm not going to sort of do too much. You can see my lighting there. But the other thing that is interesting and unusual about this is that it has an inner box lid as well. So you take one lid off only to be presented with another. So when I open this, what you will see is that quite a lot of this has been taken out of the box already. So I'm going to take this out here and put that away under there for a minute, and then take the rest of this out and then take the box away. But there is a reason why this is out of the bag, and this kit of components actually comes all in one bag as it happens. There's one bit that escaped there somewhere, it fell off the sprue. So let's take that box and put it away somewhere out of the way. Try not to knock the camera. I'll just put that away on the floor over there for a minute. We'll put the sprue components over here, and we'll come to them in a minute. But the reason why this is out of the bag is I did try to make a video of this kit a little while ago, about a week ago, and I had all sorts of problems with people knocking at the door and the phone ringing and goodness only knows what. So it was abandoned, and I'm now having to remake it. I mean, as you know, I don't edit any of my videos, but I didn't think it was really good enough to be reproduced on YouTube for yourselves, and so here we are again. So as I say, the kit itself is 132 scale. I think there are some 148 scale variants of this, but I thought I'd go with a 132. It is 132, isn't it? I'm not going to look foolish now, am I? Yes, I think it is. Yeah, 132 says at the top here. Look, 132. The Gladiator itself was designed and built, excuse me, towards the beginning of the Second World War, around about 1935. There were three variants. There was a Mark I and a Mark II and a Sea Gladiator. So the Sea Gladiator was strengthened in its undercarriage and also in other areas. It also had an arrestor hook as well, I believe. Obviously it was strengthened in undercarriage and so on because it would have to be fired off a catapult. The Mark I and the Mark II Gladiators, I believe the engine was different, and you can tell the difference apparently quite quickly as well, from what I understand, in the sense that the Mark II Gladiator has a three-blade propeller, and the Mark I Gladiator has a two-blade Watts wooden propeller. I think that three-blade propeller is made by Fairy, and it's an aluminium alloy propeller. So the instruction manual, as you can see, is on slightly shiny paper, and hopefully that doesn't get too much in the way. We'll do our best to not let it get in the way. We've got a decal sheet here as well, I don't know who makes these, but the one thing that stood out fairly quickly, as you can see, I'll just zero in on that if I can. There we are. You can see these. Let's get my poker. You don't want my great meaty fingers getting in the way, do you? The dials for the decal dials are all separate, so these are going to have to be cut away from the paper individually. And I think this is the orientation as they are for the Mark II Gladiator, so you have the blind flying controls here. The detail on these is not as great and as significant as, for example, on the Qatari Spitfire, which is very significant indeed. They're almost photographic quality. But at the scale, from arm's length, they look pretty good, I should imagine. So there we go. We'll zero back out again so that we get back to there. But you have 3 variants, I think. N5832, N2308, and one other. I can't remember which, but what I'm going to do, I think quite likely, is build the 247 Squadron variant, which was based at RAF Roborough being slightly north of Plymouth, for those of you who don't know it. As you'll know, I live near Dawlish, so it's not far away, so it has a sort of local flavour to it, shall we say. So what we'll do is I'll do my usual thing of having a quick run through the instructions, and we'll pick out interesting things as we go through the instruction leaflet, and see what we can find. So as we go over the page, we go from shiny paper to not shiny paper. That's actually quite useful. There's a sprue call out. There are some highlighted areas here and here, for example, which I'm going to guess are things that aren't required for this particular kit. That looks like a piece of control panel that's perhaps not required. That also, I suspect that that's probably for the Mark I control panel, and the Mark II control panel, instrument panel, I beg its pardon, we'll look at in a minute. So there's your sprue call outs here, so we can check. This component goes, I think, in there, so that's 25, but don't know whether they've got, I'm sure they did have, oh yes, it's C25. Look, there's a big C there. There we are. So there we go. So look, moving straight into the instructions, let's have a quick look at this. What we can see is the first thing they're asking us to do is to fit the two, a Browning machine gun to the starboard half. So as you can make out here, the machine gun sticks out the side here, and actually is what's called synchronized machine gun, and it fires through the propeller blades, well, not actually through them but past them, as you can understand. What this meant, of course, is that the breeches for the machine guns were within reach of the pilot, so if they did jam, he could unjam them whilst he was flying. So the Gladiator itself had 4 machine guns. There were 2 inboard here, and then there were 2 mounted on the lower main plane section outboard of the interplane struts. So we'll come to that in a minute, and be able to see that fairly quickly. So I'm going to put that away to one side. I'm going to move my decals out the way somewhere. I think I'll put them on top of the swear box for a minute. There we go. They'll be fine there just for a minute. So first things first, put the machine gun in here. So and then another small component. I can't quite see what D20 actually is, to be honest with you. D20. We'll have a look at that in a second, possibly. And then when we go to step 2, we're then putting in the that looks to me like the tail wheel support, I would suggest, and then there's some identification navigation lights. Then there's an elevator trim wheel. Ask me how I know. Well, I'll tell you in a minute. So that's the elevator trim wheel going onto the framework, which is then put into the side here. So then we'll have the trim frame and the machine gun in, and then we're into the cockpit floor here, with component F1, which I thought was not going to be used. No, quite clearly that isn't the case. So cockpit component there, F1. We'll take a look at that. I think we'll just have a quick glance at that, which is just here. Let's see if we can make that. There we go. We can make that focus. There we go. Somewhat detailed. It's a little bare and blank. I think may have to look at my sources and do some research there and see what that looks like. in real life. May have to visit Gloucester Aircraft Museum, see if I can get a look inside the aircraft. If I ask nicely, they might let me, eh? So yes, installing the that F1 into the F1 frame there, and then putting the floor in here, which I think that's for the seat back. You can see the throttle quadrant there, so that's quite similar to a Spitfire and Hurricane throttle quadrant. And then we're on to part 7 and 8. 7 looks like the installation of the compass, and 8 is the rudder bar here. Let's just zero in on that. You can see the rudder bar there. So I know that previous wheel that we looked at is the elevator trim wheel. This is the rudder trim wheel, so it's foot operated rudder trim wheel, which is, I think, quite unusual really. Immediately after that we're assembling the seat, and then we're into the business of putting the control column in, the compass. I think you might call that a binnacle actually. It probably is a binnacle, or would be known as that. But as you can see, very familiar for the Spitfire bores, a bit like me. I'm a Spitfire bore, everybody knows that. There's a spade grip there, so that's really quite interesting to look at. Let's have a quick look at that's D61. Let's see if we can find. I think that's C. That I think might be D. There we are, D. So where's our spade grip here? There's our spade grip. We'll just zero in on that, just have a quick look at that. I mean, again, it's fairly basic, but lick of paint and some weathering, and that would look quite good. It's not as detailed as the Spitfire ones, obviously, that you see. So there we go. I'll leave that wing section sprue down there, and then the cockpit floor, which I think was a wooden floor. So Nigel's modelling bench's little tutorials on weathering wooden floors would be quite useful. Then we move to the port side fuselage section here, and we're putting all those frameworks together to turn it into an aircraft to some extent. Quite a few little sections to go in here. The step 13 will be the instrument panel, the main instrument panel, which goes underneath the cockpit section here, and as you can see, you have the standard blind flying controls system that you see on Hurricanes and Spitfires and so on all through the Second World War, with the artificial horizon, gyro compass, altimeter, airspeed indicator, turn and slip indicator, and the other one I can't remember immediately, but those were the blind flying, the important controls, and then everything else is around this. In general, it'll be engine controls and then other types of control from there. Then we have the tail wheel. So what I said last time about this tail wheel, this is something else. I suspect that's probably there for the rudder and elevator controls. But things move quite quickly here. There's going to be quite a lot of paint preparation to be done here, I think, before we get this shut up. And I think painting the outside of the aircraft is going to be challenging due to the presence of the machine gun, which one would have to put in here. So more components and greeblies and squib knockets being fitted here onto the other fuselage section. And then we're at step 20 before we start to get the fuselage sections together. In terms of the outside the fuselage sections, there's some nice detail there. I will say, I think these Zeus fasteners here, let's see if we can get far in and have a look at these Zeus fasteners. They look a bit raised to me. I don't know whether they're supposed to be. Again, I'm going to have to check my references on this, because in terms of scale, they'd be raised really quite significantly, I would say. So I shall have to look at that with a view possibly to sanding them down if they're too raised. But I don't know at this moment, so I may be wrong, and that's fine. So that's something to be checked. Then we're looking at, in step 22, installation of the part 21 here, which we've assembled, which is the gun sight. So there we go, and now we're into in step 23, rudders, elevators, right up to step 28, and installation thereof. So yes, that component we installed right early on in the back here obviously has to do with the securing of the rudder, I would think, something along that line. Now, step 29, we're looking at a pilot access door in the same way that flips down like a Spitfire or Hurricane. I'd like to do that open, so I'm going to have a quick look at how I can achieve that, because it appears there's only one option on this particular model, and that's to do that closed. Don't really want to do that, to be honest with you. I'd like to do the aircraft, shall we say, landed. Anyway, there we are. Moving forward now to the essentially completion of the fuselage by the look of it, with the installation of the enclosed cockpit here. So the Gladiator was the last biplane fighter used by the RAF, and the first biplane with an enclosed cockpit, so it was historical in a number of ways. And then finally at section 34 we moved to the main planes. So as you'll know, there are two main planes for a biplane, and those sprues are here and here, so let's just pull those sprues out. Now I'm probably going to make a mess of this when I guess which main plane is the upper and the lower. I'm going to say that this will be the, I don't need to have a look at the picture really, but I think this will be the upper one, because I think the upper main planes were invariably in one section, and quite often on biplanes the lower main planes were in two sections. So I think this therefore may very well be the lower main plane. I think this will be for the sighting of the machine guns, which were on sort of little nacelles that that sat out. But looking in a detailed way at this, you can see there's quite a lot of detail in this, and there's this scalloping of the wing sections, so that we're matching the ribbing, and this was doped canvas, so it was quite a it was a thin structure. It was fairly flimsy, and this is all made of wood, so these are wooden ribs over which you stretch a material, probably canvas, as I say, or something probably a bit lighter than that. And the point about biplanes, of course, was that they were very, very light, and they had to be, because the engines weren't really powerful enough to get them off the ground if they were too heavy. So there we are. So yes, this section that we just looked at in the C sprues, and I'm just looking at this to see whether I can find the off camera. I can't find. Oh, this is the B sprue. So this is the C sprue here. So these are indeed the lower main plane assemblies, so that you can see that's the lower side, this is the upper side. So this is where the interplane struts go. So these are the struts that stretch between the lower and the upper main planes. And there are other struts that we'll see in a minute which connect the upper main plane to the fuselage. I'll come to them in a second, because they have a different name. So we're then connecting, this is upside down now in step 36, we're connecting the lower main plane into the fuselage, putting on another piece of a covering there, and we can move on, and then we're into the upper main plane, which is the B sprue parts. So I think I said earlier on that the upper main plane is normally manufactured in one section, and this is where I think some of the complexity is going to step in terms of building this model. So we're instructed to assemble these all as one part. Then we'll have to eliminate the seam lines, and then we'll be placing the ailerons on, and then once that's done we'll be attaching the upper main plane to the fuselage and lower main plane. So as you can see here, just zero in a bit on this so that you can see this. The dog's barking downstairs, bless him. He's seeing off foul intruders, I've no doubt. So what we have here are the interplane struts here. So there are two on both sides, and then we have two struts on the port side and then two on the starboard side, the inboard struts. These short struts are called cabane struts, and then you have a main plane strut here. So the complexity is going to creep in here, where we have to make sure that we get all of this angled and set up in the right way so that we can ensure that this looks absolutely perfect, and that's going to be quite difficult. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, but do watch the build video I do, which I will do perhaps later in the year, and we'll walk through that together, and as I say, that'll be the principal challenge, I would suggest. My initial examinations of the wings themselves would indicate that there aren't really any issues with the shape of the wings and so on, so the moulding looks like it's been pretty good, and I feel sure that people will say that ICM's mouldings are good. And again, we've got the detail that you can see on these is pretty bloody good, to be honest with you. Oh, hang on a minute, that's 17 pence for the swear box. It's very nice, and I think it gives us an opportunity to really look at weathering this and making it look as real as possible. That is going to be a challenge for me, I fear. But again, come along for the ride. Come and have a look at the build videos. Hopefully you'll find them interesting. I'll try and make my videos as interesting as I can. Moving on into step 40, 41, 42, 43 and 44. Well, this is undercarriage, that's fairly obvious, and the Gladiator had a non-retractable undercarriage. So the postman's coming, so it's going to cause all sorts of havoc. And as we move on to step 45 and 46, now we can see the lower machine guns, the outboard machine guns going on. So the inner machine guns were Browning, and then I believe the outer ones were Lewis guns. So well, there he goes. He's going to make an awful noise for a minute. And there we go. There goes the post. He'll take that away and open his post. There we go. He's rushing off now with that. That's those two. Undercarriage goes on, nacelles to cover the machine guns here, and then slightly unusually we're onto the engine, and that's where this little component slips in. As you can see, that component there is C19, and the assembly of the engine here. Again, check the references. Be quiet, doggo. This happened the last time I made this video, but I'm going to go on anyway. So it's checking the references, make sure we get all of the components the right way round and the right way up. There may be some opportunity to add in tappet rods, I think they're called that anyway, and do things like that. Final engine assembly here, and the engine rims here to go in up to 54, step 54. So we're nearly there then. And then there's a cowling. So the cowling seems to come in 3 sections here. And we've assembled the engine pretty much completely before we even put it on. Now, this is a bit of a mystery because we've got 2 options for the propellers. There's this one and this one. I would suggest the Gladiator Mark II uses the 3-blade Fairy propeller, and the Mark I uses the 2-blade Watts wooden propeller. They're both fixed pitch, but that doesn't really matter. So I'm sort of surprised you get this option. I'm probably going to go for the 3-blade propeller because that's as per my references. And then we're into rigging. It's a 132 scale kit, so there's much opportunity for rigging. So we have some tail wheel rigging here, and then there's rigging between the cabane struts. Now, this rigging in a cross here on both sides here is called incidence rigging. So the cabane struts are designed to attach the wing upper section to the fuselage, but transfer the energy from the propeller, from the engine, to the upper main plane. And therefore these incidence wires retain tension here and offer additional box-like strength to these particular structures, because the wings are quite thin, they're made of wood, they're covered in doped material. There's not a lot of strength in them, so you have to strengthen and brace everything to make certain the whole thing doesn't come to pieces. Additionally, and we'll get to that in a minute, I suspect, there will be, there we go, bracing wires here as well. So there are bracing wires that extend from the central part of the main plane lower up to the interplane struts here, and those are called landing wires, the ones that go from the bottom upwards to these sections. And then there are two sets of wires that go from the top of the main plane downwards to the struts here, and they're called flying wires. Now, when the flying wires are in tension, so yeah, let's take a step back. These wires can be in tension, but they can't be in compression because clearly they're made of wire. So when the aircraft is flying, the flying wires are under tension and it stops the wings from doing that. And when the aircraft is landing, then the landing wires are in tension and it stops the wings from doing that. So you have strength either way, and what you end up with is a box structure section that you can then strengthen the wings with. So these are going to present a bit of a challenge to put in, and one can use the rigging wire that one can get that's that sort of slightly stretchy stuff that looks like elasticated string, or one might perhaps even select very thin 0.1 millimeter perhaps nichrome wire. That might prove to be quite an easy way of doing this, although I rather suspect that unless you get these exactly right, they're going to sag, which one wouldn't want to happen, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure which one I'll select so far, but I am going to put rigging wires in. I've decided to do that because I think it would be a good thing to do. And then towards the final end of this, we have the aerial cable, all AM antennas in pre-war and war aircraft. You needed to have an antenna. The FM radios didn't need that, which is why on later Spitfires, for example, you see an aerial post but with no rigging wires off it. And there is a mask template provided here so that you can use this to cut out for the canopies. I think I'd be inclined to do that, shall we say, earlier than this. And then the final challenge, of course, is going to be painting the aircraft itself. So, as I've said, I've chosen 247 Squadron, which is Gladiator Mark II at RAF Roborough. I think the real challenge is going to be getting it's a Sky Type S underwing colour, and then it looks a bit like pattern A for a Spitfire, but it'll be dark earth and dark green, so RAF dark earth and RAF dark green. That colour through there. The other option that's offered is this night and white on both wings as well. I think that would be an interesting finish, but I think I'd like to do this one anyway. We'll see how we go. I may choose, to do differently later on, but who knows. As you can see, both options that are given here have the fairy propeller, and there we are. But we'll take a look at that. But there we have the ICM Gloster Gladiator, which I think will be a really interesting kit. And guess what? I've managed to get that into just below half an hour. I don't like to do videos longer than that because I think it's a bit dull, but look, hopefully you've enjoyed that. Thanks very much for all the new subscribers coming on board and saying to me, yes, we like what you do. Do feel free to continue. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and obviously the subscribe button if you want to see more from me. I'm very happy to do that. I try to put out a video a week, and as I've said, I tend not to edit my videos at all, so that if something goes wrong you can see where I've made a mistake, and I'm not afraid to do that. I think that's a good thing for people, maybe, and it's, I think, more lifelike than simply editing a video to such an extent that all you see is the, shall we say, selected highlights. I'll show you the lowlights as well, why not? So there we are. Thanks very much for tuning in. I've got other videos to build and put together now, with other projects that you know I'm on at the moment, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next ones, and until then, take care everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.